So let me just add a couple seconds here. I am very sorry, but I did not have the first few minutes of this session recorded, but the rest of it is very interesting, so please enjoy.
When we say that being a member of CERT is a team sport, it is a team, absolutely. So for this session, and also just in general, I'd like you to go ahead and actually load up, if you're on a computer, a copy of the participant training manual, because we will be referring to that. And also go ahead and look at a copy of the skills checkoff list. And so that'll give you an idea of, in terms of what we're going to do when we do get a chance to meet in person. Both of these links are on the front page of the online session. Let me know if you guys need the links in the chat window as well. So actually, before we dive into Unit 6 and 7, does anyone have any questions about the class in general, about the online component, about just general thoughts that they want to discuss or share before we dive into fire safety and utilities?
Hi, Julie Snyder here.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. Quick question. I've already passed the final test. And I want to know I know I have to go through all of your other training sessions and whatnots, but I want to know what else it is that I need to do to make sure that everybody knows that I've passed, and what else needs to happen. I already have the backpack, whatever else that needs to be done. So
fantastic. I'm going to actually redirect that question to Mark. Give him a chance to unmute and take it away, Mark.
Yeah, so just hang on to everything right now. You will have received that certificate, which we'll be asking you to upload to our website. You don't need to worry about it right now because we're actually just finalizing the process. But so just hold on to everything for now. And then towards the end of everything, you're going to get a document which is going to just list all the steps that you need to complete. So you'll be uploading your certificates and whatnot. And then at that point, we'll issue your credentials. So all that will be forthcoming. So just file that away for now, and we'll get you more information.
And
my husband really wants to know when I get my vest.
Well, and just to add into what Mark said, I mean, the second part of it is going to be that in-person training. So it's the training is not complete until we've done that in-person training.
Awesome. Okay. 10-4.
Any other questions or thoughts about the overall program at this point? This is not your last chance, so definitely, as questions come up, definitely jot them down.
I have a question about, I'm actually not registered in the course.
Okay, we'll get you there.
I've been reading the material.
So when you say registered for the course, do you mean on Eventbrite, or that you haven't done the University of Utah's course?
That's a good question. I definitely haven't done University of Utah, but I don't know to what degree I am registered. I attempted to in the beginning and something got screwed up. But anyway, I have done the CERT training before, twice, I think. And the backpacks. Anyway, what my question is will I be eligible to do the in-person training if I haven't done the University of Utah thing?
That's a really good question. My gut instinct is to say that we can't give you, because the in-person class is a part of the whole University of Utah's that complete CERT program, and that we're not dividing it up into chunks. So I would encourage you, if you have the time and are willing, to go ahead, and we'll send and make sure that you have the link to registering and taking the online course. It will be review, but we feel that that's really useful for people because this is material that we don't encounter every day. And so if you are willing, that's what we would strongly encourage you to do.
Let me just add to this. I am looking at the master roster and I see that you completed CERT training in February of 2018. And so at this point, really, to be up to date, all we require is that you would come to a drill day. But it's still very easy to do the online course, and it is a fantastic review.
I would like to ask a question that I had already emailed to Cam, but we've all been busy. Wondering if a person had missed one segment, can they use this class to make it up? So it's kind of similar to what she just asked.
Yeah, and actually we've been discussing that as the group of instructors, and we haven't come to a fixed decision yet, which is why I haven't gotten back to you about that yet.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there are some differences between the programs, and so it's not an apples to apples kind of question. So we need to make sure that people have all the content. So kind of we'll need to figure out the details and to give you like an official response at this point. I would always encourage people to go ahead, and if they're willing and if they've got the time, to go ahead and take the class, even if it's redundant, because it is so, I know that I always learn so much more every time I see it. But I also want to respect people's time. So I'm not going to make that a firm commitment until we've had a chance to make a group decision on that. Any other questions about the program? Fantastic. So Unit 6 is about fire safety and utility. And fire definitely is one of the hazards that we face in the area. You've almost certainly seen before this idea of the fire triangle, that in order to put out a fire, you have to remove one of the things that it needs. You have to remove either the fuel, the oxygen, or the heat. Firefighters joke that it's actually a fire square, and you have to remove a battalion commander, which is, and that if you remove the battalion chief, then the fire will go out too. Rather than having me read every slide, what I'd like to do is just kind of, does anyone have any questions or concerns about this topic? And then we'll go on to the next one. And while you think about that, I'm going to let my dog out so that she doesn't destroy my door. Hang on. Go on, go. Okay. So not hearing any questions. So going more into the, how do you size up a situation? And it really goes back to those core ideas. Do I have what I need in order to be able to be safe and effective? It cannot be repeated often enough that we, in our desire to be helpful, obviously that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. We want to be helpful. We have to make absolutely sure that we do not create more of a problem by becoming a victim ourselves. And so we have to think about, if there is a situation, do I have the right equipment? Are there other hazards? Is it structurally damaged in a way that is going to prevent me from escaping? And can we fight it effectively? At this point, I would like you to go ahead and pull up your document of your participant manual, and go ahead and go to chapter 6, page 4. And you'll see that there is a list of a fire size up. And so this is a tool to help us think through what are the things. And I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to switch the screen sharing. So this is the participant manual. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump to, let's see. Oop, I thought I was going to jump, but instead I'll scroll. So while I do this, if you could go ahead and pull up your own copy. And I stand corrected. It is on chapter, it's page 6.4 and 6.5. And none of this is rocket science. I mean, clearly, this is something that we want to think about. Are there hazardous materials? Are there other hazards there? But we know that when there's a lot going on, our ability to remember all of these details might not be as strong as we want it to be. And that's one of the reasons why we use a field operations guide. And this is something that you may already have a copy of if you've taken a CERT class before. This is an older version of it here. The new ones that we've just ordered and will be handing out at the skills day look a little bit different. But in these, there is the exact same material. This is just in time information about, for example, hazardous materials. And so the reason I bring this up is that being confident and competent to respond to a disaster is not about having all of this knowledge in your head, but it's knowing where to be able to find it. And so having a resource guide like this is incredibly helpful, and it's what's referred to as a cognitive aid. As I said, we've got a bunch on order. We also have found this is the copy that we're using now. It's put out by California volunteers. I'm going to put in the chat window a link actually to that. Let's see. Actually, if I could ask Mark or Chip to go ahead and grab that. I did a shortcut. Actually, hang on. I will do this. Stand by. I'm going to go ahead and share the slide deck again. Give me just a moment. Okay. And in fact, actually, and I'm going to zoom to you're getting a quick preview of what we're, and let me jump us. So that link right there, bit.ly/WPV-CERT.org. And this is basically it's a copy. It looks a little strange because it's basically ready to be printed, but it has all of the content. If you want to go ahead and see a copy of the field guide ahead of time, and so that'll show it to you. And that includes a page on the fire size up. Is there anything that people would like to add about fire size up, about fire chemistry, something that added from personal experience or knowledge?
Clean your chimneys.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, we had a lovely chimney fire. They fortunately were at the Mounted Patrol having a dinner. So they were here in 2 seconds, but $20,000 later, yeah, it's an expensive
No.
thing to avoid a chimney sweep.
My goodness.
You know, I would just add that as a CERT, if you're going to approach a fire to try to extinguish it, that A, you never do it alone. And B, before you go in, make sure that you can see 2 ways out, because you always want to make sure that if things get worse all of a sudden, you can get out quickly and stay safe. Keeping yourself safe is job 1.
Here, here.
Great point, Chip. Are we going to go through the buddy system and examples of, say, a video of 2 CERTs fighting a small fire?
Hadn't planned on it.
So a lot of that material in terms of the logistical details you will see are a part of the skills that we will be covering in the in-person day. There was some video, not about the specific 2-team version within the University of Utah class. But if there is a specific one that you are aware of, I encourage you to post that on the mailing list for this class as well.
I'll see if I can find it.
That'd be great. So in terms of details of fighting fires, something that you may be aware of is that there are different kinds of fire extinguishers, and that they are for different kinds of fires. As you saw in the class, one component of it is being aware of if something is an oil fire, that you absolutely don't want to be spreading the fire by spreading water on it. So you need to know. That said, there are quite a few fire extinguishers that are a combination that are ABC fire extinguishers. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are the most common.
I just posted a link, by the way, to a great video. I was surprised I could find it, but it covers all that you were talking about, Carol.
And I do want to point you to, in terms of fire suppression safety, a lot of it, go ahead and if you can pull up page, I can't even see the size of that. I think that's 612. And a lot of that is the details of always working with a partner, having a buddy, and that ability to approach a fire. Actually, at this point, I want to have Chip address, there's an issue about fire extinguishers that many people, there's a myth about tapping them. And I want him to respond to the comment about that.
Yeah, so when we, I guess 3 years ago now, we're giving this class, it came up that there was a question about, yeah, I've been told I should turn my extinguisher upside down and softly pound on it a little bit to make sure that it doesn't get compacted, that the powder doesn't get compacted. And thinking about that, it seemed like I had never heard that expressed from any manufacturer. And so it seemed like something we should research a little more, and we did. And we contacted a number of manufacturers and found one manufacturer actually says on their site, no, don't do it. And another said, listen, if you can find any manufacturer that in their operating instructions says to do it, let me know, because quite frankly, if it is a UL listed fire extinguisher, it has been tested and certified that the powder inside will not compact. And as soon as you start to discharge that extinguisher, the gas inside expands and the powder basically liquefies and flows very freely. And turning a fire extinguisher upside down and pounding on it, no matter how gently, and this was told to me directly by one of the guys who wrote the standards on fire extinguishers, said you're more likely to damage the fire extinguisher than to do any good. So don't pound on your fire extinguishers. And you'll be told contrary by the people that service fire extinguishers. This is still common knowledge among service technicians that you're supposed to do that. Don't do it. That's all.
Okay. Something else about fire extinguishers that I think is really important for people to know is to realize that they last a very, very short period of time. That even a fairly big one, you've got, I think about 40 seconds worth of spray. And so that's just something to be aware of. A question came up of, can we discuss our part when it comes to evacuations, like last summer's situation? Mark, do you want to address that?
Evacuations, that is always a topic that comes up, but that's not something that we're going to cover here in our CERT class because it's not part of our curriculum. Of course, with evacuations, you're never going to be told exactly, or you should always know multiple ways out from your home. The sheriff's department, in coordination with the fire district, will communicate evacuation information to people, but that's very dynamic because they, of course, don't know exactly where the fire is coming, or where it's going, etc. beforehand. So,
I think sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, Cam.
I was just going to say, and I think the important detail is that at this point in time, there is no official role for CERT in evacuations. That it's conceivable that that's something that could evolve in the future, but that's not part of our current training, nor is it part of our current scope. And something that is almost counterintuitive about CERT teams is that it's really important that we stay within our scope of practice. So even when there's something that clearly something needs to be done, it doesn't necessarily need to be done by us. And there's a natural tension there. And that in order to be able to be a reliable, almost predictable, for us to be part of the system, we have to be very mindful that we are not overstepping those bounds so that we can be a really reliable partner to the professional rescuers. And that, honestly, that does take discipline.
Yeah, and Cam, there's the comment about the new zone haven system, which is the new Know Your Zone campaign. And the fire district, along with the sheriff's department, will be using these zones to notify people if they're in an evacuation notice or warning. So
and
more
they're
information.
going to be broadcasting that, and they're going to be really presenting that and rolling it out. Some of you may have had some exposure to Zone Haven already with our past fires. To be honest, they were still in beta, but it's like they were needed, and so they stepped up to the plate. But the official rollout is actually happening in the very near future. So in turn, kind of going back to the curriculum, one thing to be aware of course, is that sources of fires, that utility systems are definitely a part of it. One of the things to be very aware of is that natural gas has the smell added to it so that we can smell it and be aware of it. And definitely one of our roles is to be aware of that and to know how to safely turn off natural gas if we smell it. An important detail is that we don't turn off it just preventatively because of some of the challenges of turning gas back on safely. Also being aware of course, and we know this from, in fact, recently, that there were some transformers that were potential sources of fires that took place recently. Is there anything anyone wants to add about either the electrical system or natural gas as a hazard?
So one thing to keep in mind is that propane sinks and natural gas rises.
And Vicky, if you want to just go on a little bit more of how does that affect us in terms of from a response perspective?
Well, just in terms of if you had to escape, you smelled gas and you had to escape, you wouldn't want to be crawling along the floor if it's propane gas.
Yeah,
And
or just to add to that, so if you have a propane tank that is damaged or a pipe that's been damaged, and let's say that house is up above a low-lying area, well, propane will, as Vicky said, it's heavier than air, so it will flow down into that valley. So you could have a higher concentration of propane in these lower lying areas. So just be aware that that's a potential hazard. Whereas if it's a propane leak, you don't have that that happening because it's just going to rise.
Natural gas leak. Right?
Natural gas.
Natural gas, that's what I meant.
Yeah. One thing to add as well is that a very common hazard after a disaster is people cooking inside, using a gas stove inside a house. And a very, very common, both as a risk of fire, but also as a source of carbon monoxide. So if you do not already have carbon monoxide detectors, I strongly encourage you to do so. Also, if you are like myself, someone who goes car camping, I actually encourage people to have a carbon monoxide sensor in the car or the RV with them as well. There's a question on the list of why you shut off the main breaker last. I have some theories, but I don't actually know for sure. Does anyone know for sure?
Yes, I can tell you. If you shut off the main breaker first, then you're cutting off current to everything that might have been drawing it at once. And that is, it's more of a disruption to the system. And so if you shut off the individual circuits first, you're gently de-energizing the system. Likewise, you know that the smaller circuits have been shut off when you go to turn everything back on. You especially then again want to make sure that the other breakers are off so that when you turn on the main, it doesn't immediately try to draw power to everything that starts up. These kinds of things can damage transformers and cause a huge surge in the main lines. You just don't want to do that.
So you've got a lot more control that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let me add to that. One reason is that if you trip a main breaker where there's a substantial load on it, it's more likely to cause an arc in the breaker. And that arc, although it's small and contained and is well within the capability of the breaker, if you're in an explosive atmosphere, like you have a gas leak, then that could be an ignition source. So you're limiting the chance of an arc happening if you're lowering the load on the breakers. So that's why you would do it in that order.
Thank you both. So going on to hazardous materials, remember that from a CERT perspective, all of these are the exact same thing as a stop sign. And that the rule of thumb that I've heard about hazardous materials is literally a rule of thumb that if you hold your hand out in front of you, that the size of a hazardous situation should be smaller than your thumb. And that tells you how far away that you should be at a minimum. There's a question that came up of what if you have solar? And that's a really good question in terms of safety. And I don't know. Does anyone here know what the best practice is in terms of solar systems?
You need to de-energize a solar system as well, because that can continue to conduct current, even if you've turned off your main electrical system.
Yeah, there'll be a PV or disconnect that's required by law. It's going to be in the same location as your main breaker typically, but just be aware if you have solar, know where your PV disconnect switch is. It's on the side of your house somewhere or inside.
You know, it strikes me that that is a great topic as a future standalone session as we have more and more people who are moving to solar and having battery packs. So any other questions about fire safety or utility in general?
I'd like to just insert some more notes about the natural gas shutoffs. We have in Woodside a matching fund to install natural gas automatic shutoff valves, earthquake triggered automatic shutoff valves. And you know, in fact, that matching fund is good for clearing your property, for doing all sorts of taking down trees and so forth, and clearing underbrush, and also for hardening your home, for putting in ember resistant vent grills, and putting in spark arresters on the chimney, and for putting in the earthquake triggered natural gas shutoff valves. I want to also point out that if you do that and you want to be able to turn your gas back on without getting into trouble, there is a certain amount of code that's involved, and anybody who wants to know what that code is, it's possible, it's doable, but basically the valve has to be between your meter and the home, and that pipe needs to be up to the same standard as your home system, not PG&E's system. Then you own that pipe and you can turn that back on. If you have any suspicion that there might be a leak, I'd still let PG&E do it, because they know how to do that safely.
Fantastic, thank
That's
you.
great, Chip, but we should mention that there's a cap on how much they give you on the matching fund
There is
per year.
$3,000 per year. So if you spend $6,000 on those things, they will pay for $3,000 of that per year, max.
If you could find a link to that, that would be great, and send it out.
I will.
So the other thing about the emergency shutoff valves, at the time we did ours, there are very few places that will do it, number one. But number two, our insurance company, which is not a generous insurance company by any stretch, gave us like a 5% reduction on our homeowners insurance for installing it.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was only, I think it was like $750 to install.
So what I have shown on the screen now is from the skills checkoff list, which I referred to at the beginning. And just to give you an idea of the kind of things that we'll cover when we do have a chance to get in person, and we'll get a chance to actually, one of the best ones is a chance to actually fire the fire extinguisher and really experience just having the firsthand experience with that if you haven't done so already. Question someone has is the earthquake valve benefit extended to propane systems too, or just with the natural gas service? I don't know. Does anyone have a quick answer to that before we go on to Unit 7?
I have not heard that question tested in reality. However, I would imagine that the fire department would be happy to write that recommendation. And if the fire department writes that recommendation, then the town will pay for it. I'm looking here at the page where the town describes the fund, and a propane shutoff would certainly seem to fit within their description.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, it's 6:40. I'd like to go ahead and move into Unit 7, which is light search and rescue. But before I do so, are there any other questions or thoughts that have come up about fire suppression as a topic? And of course, any question, any comments, any concerns that people have, we do have the mailing list, and people haven't been using it too much for discussion, but I encourage you to do so. And so that said, I'll wait a moment and see if there are any questions before going on. Okay, hearing none. Unit 7 is getting into doing the light search and rescue. And as we have said before, our safety is number one. And that is, it's enlightened self-interest. If we cannot help others if we do not protect ourselves. It is vital to our ability to be helpful is to make sure that we do not underestimate the risks to ourselves. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that we have to remember that our mantra is that we want to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people using the resources and manpower that we have available to us. And there will be times that the best and safest thing for us to do is to simply raise awareness. If someone is trapped and we are not able to help them, we will do them more good by making others aware of that than us putting ourselves in harm's way, which then reduces the number of rescuers and increases the number of victims. So like with Fire Size Up, there is a framework for thinking about how do you size up a situation? How do you make these decisions? What are the things that you are thinking about? And especially because we are not professionals, this isn't something that we practice all the time. We use the tools to help us ask ourselves and each other the right questions. So you'll see a list of that. This is on page 7.4 of your book. It also, you will find this so you'll have these questions literally with you. And so you'll have this as a tool to ask yourself the questions. First thing we do is that we gather facts. Just like with responding to a medical situation, I've heard it described as don't just do something, stand there. The first step is to find out more. And what you're trying to find out is is there something here that can harm myself, my partner, others? What are they? Be aware of the situation. Don't just rush in. You're going to be able to do a better job by thinking about it first. You're going to be able to think better by keeping yourself calm and by having thinking partners. When we're thinking about structures, what we're looking at is kind of thinking, it's like, is this a go, no go? And remember, the title of this unit is Light Search and Rescue. We are not turning you into professional rescuers, but we are empowering you that if it is cosmetic damage and it is safe for us to go in, then we can help people. If you see a floor, if you see a ceiling or a wall down, that is not a stable situation, but we can gather information and we can share that information. The fact that we're a team, the fact that we communicate information with each other helps the professional responders make good decisions about their use of resources. It's not about us being heroes, it's about us being part of that team. I love the question of what else could go wrong? Ask yourself those questions, ask each other those questions, not from a fear factor, but from a let's think this through. What can we do to make it safer? How stable is this situation? And what resources do we have? We have to be willing to say no. We have to be willing to say, this is not safe for me to do. Yes, there is somebody, there could be someone hurt. I know it's hard to hear, but that alone is not a reason for us to go into a building. It has to be safe for us. And the reason why I'm repeating this over and over is that we need to own that. We need to know that in our soul. We have to know that we are protecting ourselves And that is a source of service for others, is that if we don't protect ourselves, we cannot be of service. So then with that information, we make a plan, we determine the best use of resources, we put the plan into effect, and then we do continual assessment of that plan. And this is a continual process. Again, this is all stuff that we read. It's like, of course, this makes sense. Of course, well, of course we would do this. But in the moment, there's a lot going on. It's a lot harder to think. And that's where having the cognitive aids and a lot of the training is becoming familiar with these ahead of time so that we know that they're there when we need them. It's not about us learning this for the first time when we need them. It's being able to have that tool to refer to it. So there is a scenario in there. Looking at the time, I'm not going to go into that. So I'm just going to now, is there any questions about doing a size up for a go, no go on a CERT response? Okay. That being the case, I'm going to continue on, but at any point if questions come up, I really do want this to be open, and so really meeting your needs. This is all a resource for you. When we do searches, one of the things that we're going to do to assist that search, one is if there are people who know the building, get information ahead of time. Find out what we might expect. Take it with a grain of salt, and now if we're in our, and this is also the reason why in our immediate neighborhoods, it's better, it's so powerful for us to know our neighbors and have an idea of who to expect there, who we might be looking for. You saw in the course some description of, in a building, the idea of structural voids and individual voids. And from all our training, we know that when the event of an earthquake, that it's duck, cover, and hold on. Get underneath a solid object, hold on to the leg of that desk so that if it moves, you move with it. I know that when I was a kid, they actually just said it was duck and cover. They've added now to it, if you haven't been in school in a long, long time, it's now duck, cover, and hold on. And it's that grab the leg so that you're curled up underneath. And be aware that getting down low, below the level of other solid objects, even if it's not something that you can get all the way under, that's still protective. Just as another aside, when I was a kid, they always talked about go to a doorway. That's no longer recommended. And a lot of that is because in a doorway, imagine that you're bracing yourself in the doorway. Those fingers are going to be very vulnerable. The doors opening and shutting. Also, getting down low is going to be protecting you a lot more.
Let me add too that there was a lot of advice given about the triangle of life, and if you get down next to a wall in the corner and so forth, that things will collapse and you'll be in a triangle void and so forth. And all of these other things, the doorways, the triangle of life, basically they did a statistical study and looked at who survived various incidents and earthquakes. And the people who got underneath something, even just a chair or a small desk, and covered their heads and held on, were the ones that had a much better outcome. And again, the reason you hold on is that the world is going back and forth. And if you don't hold on, that desk you're underneath might be a couple of feet over there when something falls from the ceiling. So hold on.
Yep.
So Kim, I have a question. It's Vic on that. So if you get you're sleeping in a bed and you get a chance to get under a bed, I've always worried about getting trapped under a bed with a large mattress. Is that considered, Chip, to be a reasonable place to go to get under if there's not a table nearby and so forth, or is that a place to be avoided?
I would look at the bed and consider how sturdy it is and think about if something falls on it, is the bed just going to collapse on you? A lot of bed stands are not made to take much. I bought a bed stand that intentionally is made with hardwood and well reinforced so that, yeah, I could get under it if I needed to, for just that purpose.
Okay.
And they're finding that, you know, really just even a chair, anything that you can get under will take that impact of something initially falling. And that's what you're really worried about, is that it disperses the energy of that initial impact of something falling rather than dispersing it into your skull.
Right. Lynn, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, yes, I do. Thank you. I've heard that one should put a pillow over their head if it happens when we're in bed. I mean, is that true?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's good advice. If you cannot shelter in any other way, yeah, certainly that will keep anything that falls on your head from delivering that impact directly into your bones. So, yeah.
Right. I'm not speaking from any professional knowledge. My instinct would be to get down to the ground. But that's conjecture, not statistical knowledge. I do want to share a mental image though, and I wish I had pulled up the real picture itself, but a stunning photograph that I saw from the 1984 earthquake in Mexico City is a room that has a bunch of those chairs that are just the kids' chairs with a little piece of wood in front of it, rinky-dink chairs. It was floor, rinky-dink chairs, ceiling, rinky-dink chairs, ceiling. The building had pancaked, but even these rinky-dink chairs, a whole group of them were holding up the ceiling. It really, to me, reinforced the importance of getting down low, even though those weren't big, heavy desks. If you were below the level of that which would catch a material, in our situation, chances are it would not be structure collapse, but even non-structural hazards falling. That getting low is so valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. When we do searches, one of the things that we want to do is be thorough and efficient. And part of that is through the marking of doors. If you've kind of seen any video of disaster responses, you've probably noticed that there's the big graffiti on the doors. What you don't see at a distance, though, is there's information written into that. We'll go over this in the in-person class day, but that, as you saw in the course, that idea that you start with your identification of who you are, your time in and your time out, because this is about accountability of our teams as well, so that we know that if someone did get into trouble, that we know where they are. Very important. Also, that information of what was searched, what was found, what and where people have been moved. And so we're using the building itself as a location of information.
Question on the previous slide. Is CERT 23, where do you get that ID number? Is it your division or is it from your actual ID?
You know, I don't think we have that level of really worked out at this point.
Well,
whoever is the team leader will make team designations of some kind for purposes of documentation. That will probably be done at the time of the event, rather than being done ahead of time, because we don't know who's going to be there.
So Carol, for this particular example, move to CERT 23 medical. In that case, it's going to be our branch staging locations or our branch medical operations. So in your case, if you establish a Skyline medical treatment area, then that would be where you would be moving victims. So it's all dynamic, but in this case, it would be most likely the branch.
Okay. And one more observation I remember from the previous class I took is they said do not write this on the garage door because garage doors often get put up.
Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Having it
yeah.
on, just having it on a wall, and actually just not having it on a door in general, but having it on a wall.
Now, people can be very hesitant about marking up a wall and so forth. Don't hesitate, just mark the wall. The wall can be repainted.
Here, here.
So if somebody lives at the bottom of a long driveway and the house is not visible from the street, does it make sense to do the markings on their mailbox, which usually is on the street?
Or both.
Yeah, my instinct would be to do both, but that's a really good question. And it's something that probably we should think about because of the nature of our locations of what is our standard, because you want it to be somewhere that people will look. And my instinct, I mean, it should be on the house because then if someone else comes by, it should be there. But I could very easily see value in it being duplicated.
Yeah, but the problem with duplicating it is they probably won't be kept in sync. So that'll lead to inaccuracies.
It's a good question. I don't have a specific recommendation, but I think that is something that as a team and as an organization that we should consider and discuss. So I'm just noticed the time. And so I just, pretty much everything else about chapter 7, the idea of being very systematic. Remember, this is all about us being safe and about being efficient. And when we do searches, one of the strategies is basically always keep the right, like if you're doing a right side search, that you always are keeping on the wall on your right shoulder. It is a way of being thorough and effective. These are things that we will go through in the in-person class. Same thing in terms of the leveraging and cribbing, which you saw some excellent videos to. We'll get a chance to do that in person, talking about actual extrication techniques, the carries, things like that. There are some definite ways of making it more effective, easier to do. And those are things that we'll definitely be covering when we're in person. In fact, actually this long list these are all of the things for chapter 7, the light search and rescue, which really is in many ways our bread and butter. This is what we're going to be doing a lot of, and a lot of it is hands-on skills. So you can get a peek ahead of these are the things that we're going to be doing when we're in person. And as I mentioned before, we do have the field operating guide. The next meeting is going to be in 2 weeks because of Martin Luther King Day. And at that point, we'll talk about Unit 8, which is terrorism and hazardous material safety. I would also encourage you guys to think ahead in terms of are there topics within this course, this very large course, that you would like us to focus on as a special edition? Because I would like to keep the discussion going as much as you guys are interested and willing until we do get a chance to have that in-person class. The pandemic being what it is, we don't know when that's going to be. I suspect that we'll do it once we have enough people vaccinated that we can get enough people together. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not. I don't expect it to happen in February, but maybe it'll happen in April. But I'm certainly interested in keeping the conversation going if that is of value to you. And so please think about how might it be of value to you? What is of use to you in terms of learning more or being better organized as an individual and as a team? We do have the command post operations training also coming up this Saturday. So coming up this Saturday, the command post operations class. We then do have then on the 18th. Is that right? Did I say?
Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, the operations
Hey!
class on the 18th.
I don't think this is right.
Nope.
Hang on.
25th.
25th, my apologies. That is incorrect. I can't change it right now, but please. It is not on January 18th. That is incorrect. That is old and someone pointed out to me that, so it is actually the week after that. So January 16th, the Saturday, command post operations, January 25th, unit 8, and open up the conversation about further topics that will be of interest. Let's see. We are at 7 o'clock. If anyone has any other questions that you would that you'd like to talk about for 7 or chapter units 6 or 7, happy to stay on the line. Otherwise, I shall wish you guys a good night and see you in 2 weeks.
This is
Thanks,
Julie.
Kim.